The Woman Who Saved the Assembly Rooms, a Regency-era romance. Chapter 1. The Crack in the Ceiling. In the town of Ashcombe Wells, where the mineral waters rose warm from the earth and fashionable invalids came to recover health, spirits, and sometimes husbands, the assembly rooms stood at the very centre of consequence. They were not the grandest rooms in England. Bath naturally boasted of greater splendour, and Leamington had lately taken to lifting its chin, as though every stone in its pavement had been laid by royalty. Yet Ashcombe Wells possessed a gentler charm. Its streets curved around the spring gardens, its lodging-houses wore white shutters and climbing roses, its shop windows displayed ribbons, gloves, books, smelling salts, and little bottles of water said to cure everything from gout to disappointment. And above all, Ashcombe Wells had its assembly rooms. They were built of pale stone, with a handsome portico facing the square, a ballroom with tall arched windows, a card room overlooking the pump garden, and a concert chamber whose ceiling had been painted many years before with clouds, cherubs, and a scattering of golden stars. Miss Phoebe Hartwell knew every inch of the building. She knew which floorboards sighed near the musicians' gallery, which window latch stuck in damp weather, which silver sconce had to be polished twice because candle smoke gathered behind its glass. She knew which subscribers preferred the second row at concerts, which dowagers required chairs close to the fire, which young ladies pretended indifference to gentlemen they had watched all evening. She knew, too, that the assembly rooms were more than a place for dancing. They were where linen drapers met customers, where visiting families took lodgings because there would be society enough to tempt them, where musicians earned wages, where milliners sold feathers after every ball, where friendships were renewed, matches were made, charities were supported, and the whole town, high and humble alike, felt itself drawn into one shared rhythm of life. Her uncle, Mr. Edwin Pike, was the manager, and in truth, he had once been equal to all the duties the position required. But rheumatism had stiffened his hands, anxiety had weakened his temper, and since Phoebe had come to live with him after her mother's death, she had gradually become indispensable. She prepared subscription lists, hired musicians, soothed offended patrons, arranged rout cake, ordered candles, received complaints, paid tradesmen when there was money, delayed them gracefully when there was not, and knew exactly how to smile when someone said, "My dear Miss Hartwell, you are very useful," as though usefulness were a poor substitute for beauty, fortune, or marriage. At 26, Phoebe had learned not to be wounded by such remarks, or at least not to show it. On the morning the trouble began, she was standing in the ballroom with a ledger under one arm and a basket of silk ribbons over the other, supervising the hanging of garlands for Lady Enderby's spring ball. "Higher on the left, Tom," she called to the young footman on the ladder. "No, not so high as that. We are decorating a ballroom, not attempting to snare angels." Tom laughed, and the maid below him covered her mouth. Phoebe smiled, then looked up. For one suspended moment, the whole world narrowed to a thin black line running across the painted ceiling above the musicians' gallery. It had not been there yesterday. She set down the basket slowly. "Tom," she said in a different tone, "come down." He looked over his shoulder. "Miss? Come down at once, if you please." Something in her voice made him obey without jesting. Phoebe walked beneath the gallery, lifted her candle, and examined the plaster. The crack stretched from the corner moulding toward the centre of the ceiling. It was no wider than a ribbon thread in places, but near the cornice the plaster had puckered. A small white flake fell. It landed on her sleeve. For a second she could not move. Then she said calmly, "Fetch my uncle." Within an hour, the decorations were abandoned, the servants dismissed from the ballroom, and Mr. Pike was standing with both hands on his cane, staring upward as though the crack had personally insulted him. "It is nothing," he said. Phoebe did not answer. "It is old plaster, a settlement, a draught, a trick of the light. It was not there yesterday." "Then perhaps you did not look yesterday." "I look every day." Her uncle glanced at her, irritated and afraid. Lady Enderby's ball is tomorrow. I know. Do you also know that we cannot refund 200 tickets, that the musicians are engaged, that every lodging house in Ashcombe Wells is full because of this ball? Yes. And do you know what will happen if word gets about that the ceiling is cracking? Phoebe looked upward again. I know what will happen if it falls. That silenced him. By noon, the town committee had been summoned. By 1 o'clock, 6 gentlemen stood in the ballroom, each with his hands behind his back, each gazing up in the manner of men who wish to appear knowledgeable without committing themselves to an opinion. Sir Lionel Bracken, chairman of the committee and owner of the largest house in the town, declared it regrettable. Mr. Phelps, the apothecary, said damp was very pernicious. Mr. Grindle, the banker, asked how much repairs might cost. Mr. Atwood, who owned several lodging houses, turned pale. Then Alderman Voss arrived. No one in Ashcombe Wells liked Mr. Voss, but everyone took care not to offend him. He had made his money in Birmingham, purchased land on the south side of the town, and recently begun speaking of improvement with the cold enthusiasm of a man who expected improvement to benefit himself before anyone else. He looked up at the ceiling and smiled. A dangerous business, he said. Phoebe disliked the satisfaction in his voice. Sir Lionel cleared his throat. We have sent for advice. Local advice? Asked Voss. Professional advice, Sir Lionel replied. Mr. Jonathan Mere is expected tomorrow from Warwick. Phoebe had heard the name. Mr. Mere was a young architect of rising reputation, recently praised for restoring a church tower near Kenilworth without disturbing its ancient stonework. He was said to be clever, serious, and ambitious. Alderman Voss gave a small shrug. An architect will tell you to spend money. That is what architects do. A practical man might advise a more profitable course. And what course is that? Phoebe asked. The men turned, as though surprised to find she had remained in the room. Voss smiled at her. My dear Miss Hartwell, these matters are scarcely within a lady's concern. My concern is the safety of every person who enters this building. Admirable. Then you will agree that closure may be necessary. For inspection, yes. For good, perhaps. Her fingers tightened around the ledger. Mr. Pike stirred. For good? Voss spread his hands. Let us be honest. The building is old. The town requires modern accommodation. A new hotel, perhaps, with a suite of rooms attached. Larger, more fashionable, more profitable. I have plans which... You have plans already, Phoebe asked quietly. A flicker passed over his face. I am a man accustomed to preparation. And I, said Phoebe, am a woman accustomed to recognizing it. Sir Lionel frowned. Miss Hartwell. She lowered her eyes, but not in apology. The meeting ended with a decision to postpone Lady Enderby's ball and close the ballroom until Mr. Mere had inspected it. The card room and concert chamber might remain open for the present, provided no crowd gathered. By 4 o'clock, the news had spread through Ashcombe Wells with such speed that Phoebe suspected it had put on boots. At the milliner's, Mrs. Bell declared the season ruined. At the library, Captain Fane said he had always mistrusted painted ceilings. At the pump room, Lady Enderby announced that disappointment had affected her nerves and demanded a private bench. Phoebe spent the afternoon answering questions, calming tempers, rearranging engagements, and pretending that her own heart was not beating faster than it ought. Only when dusk fell and the servants had gone did she return to the ballroom alone. The garlands hung half-finished along one wall. The chandeliers were unlit. The painted ceiling, dim in the fading light, seemed to float above her like a pale sky before rain. She remembered her first assembly here at 17, when her mother had still been alive and had fastened a pearl comb into her hair. She remembered her uncle teaching her how to balance accounts at the little desk near the entrance. She remembered winter concerts, summer breakfasts, charity bazaars, election dinners, and once, during a snowstorm, half the town gathered here overnight because the roads were impassable. A building could hold memory, she thought, not sentiment alone. Memory, labour, livelihood, hope. A footstep sounded in the entrance. Phoebe turned. A gentleman stood in the doorway, tall and spare, his dark coat travel-dusted, his hat beneath one arm. His hair was brown, his features thoughtful rather than handsome at first glance, and his eyes had the steady grey of a winter morning. "Miss Hartwell?" he asked. "Yes." He bowed. "Jonathan Mere. Sir Lionel sent word that I should come directly upon arrival." Phoebe curtsied. He looked past her to the ceiling. "I see," he said. It was a simple remark, but something in the way he said it made her uneasy. Not alarmed, only aware that he had seen more in one glance than most of the committee had seen in an hour. "You have travelled today, Mr. Mere. Surely the inspection may wait until morning." "Cracks seldom improve overnight." "No," Phoebe said. "They do not." He walked into the room, his gaze moving from the ceiling to the cornice, from the cornice to the walls, from the walls to the gallery supports. He did not rush. He did not perform concern for effect. He observed. Phoebe watched him with guarded interest. After several minutes, he said, "Has there been water above?" "There was a leak after heavy rain in January. It was repaired." "By whom?" "Mr. Gibbs, the town builder." "Properly?" She hesitated. His gaze returned to her. "Honestly, Miss Hartwell." "Cheaply," she said. A faint line appeared beside his mouth, not quite a smile. "And the gallery?" "It has held musicians for 30 years. "That is not an answer. It is the answer the committee prefers." This time he did smile, very slightly. Phoebe felt an unexpected warmth rise in her cheeks and disliked herself for it. He stepped closer to the gallery and pressed his hand against the panelling. "I shall need access above the ceiling, beneath the gallery, and to any accounts of previous repairs." "You shall have them." He glanced at the ribbons and garlands abandoned on the floor. There was to be a ball. Lady Enderby's spring ball. A grave casualty. "Do not mock it, Mr. Mere." His brows lifted. Phoebe drew herself upright. A ball may seem frivolous to a gentleman concerned with stone and timber, but postponing it affects musicians, servants, caterers, lodging houses, dressmakers, chairmen, coachmen, and shopkeepers. In a spa town, society is not ornament. It is commerce. He regarded her in silence. Then he said, "I stand corrected." She had expected amusement, perhaps condescension, not apology. "I was not defending gossip," she added softer. "I was defending bread." Mr. Mere looked again at the darkened room. "Then we had better see whether the bread may be saved." And though Phoebe Hartwell had known him less than 10 minutes, she felt something within her, fear, perhaps, or hope, shift its weight. Chapter 2. Mr. Mere takes measurements. By the following morning, Ashcombe Wells had formed 3 opinions of Mr. Jonathan Mere. The first, held by Lady Enderby and several ladies of strong imagination, was that he was handsome, in a severe way, and would be improved by dancing. The second, held by Mr. Gibbs the builder, was that he was too young to know anything useful. The third, held by Alderman Voss, was that he was inconvenient. Phoebe, having spent 2 hours with him among ladders, dust, rafters, and old account books, had not yet decided her own opinion. She only knew that he asked exact questions, listened to the answers, and possessed the rare talent of making silence feel industrious rather than awkward. He had arrived at 8 with a leather case of instruments and a notebook full of neat drawings. Phoebe had met him at the side entrance, carrying keys. "You are punctual," he said. "I am responsible for a building that may be condemned. Punctuality seems the least I can offer. And keys? Those too. They began in the service passage, where Mr. Mere examined damp patches near the outer wall. From there, they climbed a narrow stair to the space above the ballroom ceiling. Phoebe had not been there since childhood, when she had once followed her uncle and been scolded for ruining her muslin on soot. The air smelled of dust, old wood, and cold plaster. Light entered through a small roof hatch. Mr. Mere crouched among the beams, running his hand along the timber. "Here," he murmured. Phoebe held the lantern closer. A beam near the gallery end had darkened with old damp, not rotten through, but weakened. Some plaster laths beneath it had shifted. "Is it very bad?" she asked. "It is bad enough to demand honesty." That sounds like an architect's way of avoiding an answer. "It is an architect's way of refusing a dramatic one." She looked at him. He tapped the beam lightly. "The damage is serious, but not necessarily fatal. The ceiling must be shored at once. The gallery should not be used. The ballroom must remain closed until repairs are made." But repaired, not demolished. His eyes met hers in the lantern light. "I have seen no reason for demolition." The relief that passed through Phoebe was so strong she had to rest one hand on a beam. Mr. Mere saw it and looked away with tact. "Thank you," she said. "I have not saved it yet." "No, but you have not buried it either." He gave a quiet laugh. It changed his face. The severity eased, and for an instant Phoebe saw the younger man beneath the professional reserve. It was gone almost at once, but she remembered it. When they descended, Mr. Gibbs was waiting below with folded arms. "Well?" he demanded. Mr. Mere removed dust from his sleeve. "The ballroom ceiling requires immediate support. I shall prepare a report for the committee." Mr. Gibbs snorted. "Report? A man could mend the thing quicker than write about it." "A man could also conceal the fault quicker than mend it." The builder reddened. Phoebe glanced between them. Mr. Mere's voice remained calm. "The January repair did not address the water's path. It patched the visible damage." Mr. Gibbs turned on Phoebe. "I did what I was paid to do." "And perhaps less than you were paid to do," Mr. Mere said. Mr. Gibbs took a step forward. Phoebe moved between them before she had considered the wisdom of doing so. "Gentlemen," she said, with a brightness that held steel beneath it, "the ceiling is cracked already. Must we add the floor?" Mr. Gibbs muttered and withdrew. Mr. Mere watched him leave. "You have courage, Miss Hartwell." "I have accounts to settle with him. Courage is merely impatience dressed well." He looked amused. They spent the rest of the morning reviewing the old ledgers. Phoebe sat at her uncle's desk, while Mr. Mere stood beside her, turning pages with careful hands. "Here," she said, "roof repairs, January, paid to Gibbs and Son, £12. For work worth perhaps £4. You cannot know that. I can suspect it with confidence." She turned another page. There were also payments approved by the Improvement Subcommittee. Who sits on it? Sir Lionel, Mr. Grindle, Mr. Atwood, and Alderman Voss. At the last name, Mr. Mere's expression sharpened. "Voss has an interest in new development," he said. "Yes. He spoke to me this morning." Phoebe stilled. "Did he?" "He suggested that my reputation would profit more from designing a modern building than repairing an old one." "And what did you say?" "I said reputations built on unnecessary destruction tend to crack." Phoebe looked down quickly, but not before smiling. By afternoon, the committee assembled in the card room. Mr. Mere presented his findings with admirable clarity. The building needed urgent work, but it could be saved. The roof must be made sound, the ceiling shored and repaired, the gallery strengthened, and portions of the plaster restored by skilled craftsmen. The estimated cost caused Mr. Grindle to cough. Alderman Voss leaned back. Excessive. Necessary, said Mr. Mere. For an old room with a painted ceiling. For a public building that supports a town economy. Phoebe, seated behind her uncle with minutes in hand, looked up. Mr. Mere did not glance at her, yet she felt the words like a shared understanding. Voss drummed his fingers on the table. And during these expensive repairs, what becomes of the season? The smaller rooms may remain in use if numbers are limited, said Mr. Mere. Concerts may be held with caution, card assemblies may continue, the ballroom must not be occupied. Lady Enderby, who had insisted on attending, lifted her handkerchief. No dancing? Not safely. My nerves, she whispered. Sir Lionel looked pained. The difficulty is funding. There is also the question of public confidence, said Mr. Atwood. Visitors may depart. Not, Phoebe said, if we give them reason to remain. Every face turned. Her uncle whispered, Phoebe. She rose, though her heart beat hard. The season need not collapse because the ballroom is closed. We may hold subscription concerts in the concert chamber, morning lectures, card evenings with reduced numbers, and a charitable promenade in the gardens. We may invite patrons to support restoration by purchasing commemorative tickets. The town tradesmen may contribute materials at favourable rates in exchange for public acknowledgement. If the assembly rooms belong to the prosperity of Ashcombe Wells, then Ashcombe Wells must be invited to save them. There was silence. Lady Enderby lowered her handkerchief. Commemorative tickets. With ribbons, perhaps, Phoebe said. Numbered. Lady Enderby considered this. I should require number 1. Sir Lionel rubbed his chin. A restoration subscription. Mr. Grindle looked less alarmed. It might be possible. Alderman Voss smiled thinly. A charming feminine scheme. Phoebe met his eyes. A practical one. Mr. Mere spoke, and likely more effective than despair. The committee agreed to consider the proposal. That, in committee language, meant no one wished to be responsible for refusing it in front of Lady Enderby. After the meeting, Phoebe remained behind to gather the papers. Mr. Mere helped without being asked. You spoke well, he said. I spoke because no one else would say what was obvious. That is often how useful revolutions begin. She looked at him sharply. Revolutions? Of the respectable kind, with ledgers. She laughed, surprising herself. The sound seemed to linger between them. Then her uncle called from the hall, and she turned away. But that evening, as Phoebe wrote notices for the printer, she found herself thinking of Mr. Mere's hand resting beside hers on the ledger, steady and ink-stained, and of the way he had defended not merely a ceiling, but the life beneath it. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath Candlelight. The first restoration concert was held on a Thursday evening under strict limitations. No more than 80 persons, no use of the ballroom, no gathering beneath the damaged gallery, and no complaining within Phoebe's hearing. The final rule proved most difficult to enforce. Still, by 7 o'clock, the concert chamber glowed with candles. The plaster medallions shone softly overhead. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a modest quartet tuned their instruments at the front. On a table near the entrance lay the numbered restoration tickets, each tied with a blue ribbon and stamped with the seal of the assembly rooms. Lady Enderby purchased number 1 with solemn grandeur. Sir Lionel took number 2. Mrs. Bell the milliner bought number 17 and announced that she had never been so proud of a ribbon in her life. By the time the music began, Phoebe had sold 43 tickets and persuaded 3 reluctant gentlemen that restoration was cheaper than public disgrace. Mr. Mere stood near the back of the chamber, not seated among the company, but observing the ceiling, the crowd, the doorways, and whenever he thought she did not notice, Phoebe. She noticed. She noticed far too much. She noticed that his evening coat, though plain, fit him well. She noticed that he listened to music with a seriousness that suggested feeling kept under firm governance. She noticed that when old Mrs. Cresswell dropped her programme, he retrieved it with a gentleness that made the old lady blush like a girl. Phoebe scolded herself. She had no time to admire architects. At the interval, she moved among the guests with a tray of subscription cards. Praise came mingled with advice. "Excellent notion, my dear. Too warm in here. Will there be dancing by Easter? The violoncello is too melancholy. I have always said old buildings are superior. Can one purchase ticket number 8 if one has already purchased number 12? Phoebe answered all with patience. Near the door, she found Alderman Voss speaking in low tones to Mr. Grindle the banker. They fell silent when she approached. "Miss Hartwell," Voss said, "how industrious you are. How kind of you to observe it. I observe everything. I had begun to suspect as much." His smile cooled. "Take care. Public enthusiasm is a delicate thing. If confidence fails, sentiment will not pay bills. Nor will schemes." Mr. Grindle looked alarmed. Voss leaned closer. "Buildings, like people, must know when their time is past." Phoebe held his gaze. "Some buildings are brought down by time, others by men impatient to profit from rubble." For a moment, the pleasant mask slipped. Then Mr. Mere appeared beside her. "Miss Hartwell," he said, "Lady Enderby is asking whether the second half may begin." It was not true. Lady Enderby was speaking animatedly to a naval captain, but Phoebe accepted the rescue. "Thank you, Mr. Mere." As they moved away, she said softly, "You were listening." "I was nearby." "That is not an answer." "It is the one a gentleman may safely give." She glanced at him, and their shared smile was brief but unmistakable. The concert resumed. A young soprano sang an Italian air, trembling at first, then gathering courage. The final note rose pure and bright beneath the ceiling. For the first time since the crack had appeared, Phoebe felt the town breathe as one. Afterward, while servants cleared glasses and extinguished candles, she found Mr. Mere in the entrance hall studying the donation ledger. "We raised £68, she said, "and promises of more. That is excellent. It is not enough." "No." She had expected polite contradiction. His honesty steadied her. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "Before the committee loses courage. Less than before the building does." Phoebe sighed. "You understand them very well. I have worked for committees." "Then you have suffered. Professionally." She smiled, then grew serious. "Do you truly think we can save it?" He looked toward the closed ballroom doors. "Yes. If we can keep Voss from convincing the town that demolition is inevitable." "Why is he so determined?" "Because a condemned building may be purchased cheaply and a new hotel built profitably. He would destroy the assembly rooms for a hotel. He would call it progress." The word hung bitterly in the hall. Phoebe folded her arms against the chill. "I do not oppose progress." "No?" "No. I oppose theft wearing a clean coat." Mr. Mere studied her, and something in his expression changed. "What is it?" she asked. "You are not what I expected. Nor are you. What did you expect?" A young man eager to make his name with straight lines, large windows, and no patience for old plaster. A smile touched his mouth. "And I expected a lady who cared for dances, flirtations, and whether the supper room was well lit." "I do care whether the supper room is well lit." "Of course. Forgive me. It is important. I am beginning to understand that everything here is important." There was no mockery in his voice. Phoebe looked away first. The hall had grown very quiet. Outside, carriage wheels rolled over the square. Somewhere in the building, her uncle coughed. Mr. Mere said, My father was a mason. Phoebe turned back. He worked on churches, bridges, houses, whatever would pay. He believed a good building served those who used it, not the vanity of the man who designed it. And you? I spent years wishing to design something grand enough that no one would remember I was a mason's son. The confession was so unexpected that Phoebe did not know what to say. He looked toward the portico. Then I began to see how many grand buildings are empty of affection. This place is not. No, she said softly. It is not. Their eyes met. In that moment, no music played, no committee argued, no crack spread silently above them. There was only the candle-lit hall, the scent of wax and dust, and an understanding that neither had meant to invite. Then Mr. Pike called from the stair, "Phoebe, where are the receipts?" She stepped back. "With me, Uncle." Mr. Mere bowed. "Good night, Miss Hartwell." "Good night, Mr. Mere." She went upstairs with the ledger pressed to her heart, though the receipts were in her hand. Chapter 4. A bribe in the rain. The next week brought rain. It fell steadily over Ashcombe Wells, silvering the pavements, darkening the portico stones, and testing every repair Mr. Mere had ordered to the roof. Buckets stood in the service passage. Workmen climbed ladders, plasterers examined the ballroom ceiling, carpenters shored the gallery, and tradesmen came and went with the purposeful air of men who enjoyed being part of a drama. Phoebe was everywhere. She negotiated with suppliers, wrote to absent patrons, soothed Lady Enderby, organised a lecture on Roman antiquities, and persuaded the town baker to provide seed cake for half his usual charge in exchange for a notice printed in the programme. Mr. Mere began calling her the General when he thought she was out of hearing. She pretended not to hear because she liked it too much. Their alliance became the talk of Ashcombe Wells. Mrs. Bell said they were saving the town. Captain Fane said architects always fell in love with impossible structures. Lady Enderby said Miss Hartwell must take care, for a woman who proved too capable frightened timid gentlemen. Phoebe replied that timid gentlemen were not her responsibility, but gossip, once stirred, does not always remain kind. On a wet afternoon, Phoebe entered the library to deliver notices and heard her name spoken near the shelves. "She is forever with him," said Miss Aurelia Voss, the alderman's niece, in a voice meant to carry just far enough. One must admire such dedication. Another young lady murmured, "Perhaps the assembly rooms are not the only thing under repair." There was a smothered laugh. Phoebe paused. She had endured condescension often enough. She had even endured pity. But there was a particular cruelty in women suggesting that useful work must be improper if done beside a man. She turned the corner. Miss Voss coloured, but lifted her chin. "Good afternoon," Phoebe said. "I have brought the notices for Saturday's lecture. You may wish to attend. The subject is Roman engineering. It may broaden the imagination beyond scandal." Miss Voss stared. Phoebe placed the notices on the table and left before her composure failed. Outside, rain swept across the square. She stood beneath the library awning, breathing carefully. "Miss Hartwell." Mr. Mere approached with his hat in hand, rein on his shoulders. One glance at her face altered his own. "What has happened?" "Nothing of consequence." I dislike that phrase. It usually means something of consequence has happened to someone expected not to mind. She almost smiled, but the attempt failed. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me." She shook her head. "It is only gossip." His expression hardened. "About us?" he asked. The question, direct and quiet, made colour rise to her cheeks. "About me," she said. "Women are usually generous enough to leave gentlemen uninjured." "I am sorry." "You did not speak it." "No, but my presence helped cause it." Phoebe looked at him then. Do not make the mistake of thinking yourself the cause of everything, Mr. Mere. That is a very masculine form of vanity. Despite himself, he laughed. The sound loosened something in her chest. They stood beneath the awning while rain blurred the square. I have no fortune, she said suddenly. He looked at her. I manage rooms. I keep accounts. I live with my uncle and possess 2 good gowns, 1 mended pelisse, and a talent for seating quarrelsome matrons apart at supper. Society may praise usefulness, but it does not forgive a woman who appears to forget her place. Mr. Mere's face softened, but he did not insult her with easy comfort. I am a mason's son, he said, educated by patronage, tolerated by gentlemen when useful, dismissed when inconvenient. I know something of place. She held his gaze. You do not seem dismissed. Not today. And tomorrow? That depends what we build. The words were simple, but Phoebe felt them deeply. Before she could answer, a carriage stopped outside the town hall. Alderman Voss stepped down, followed by Mr. Gibbs. The 2 men hurried beneath the portico, heads close together. Mr. Mere's eyes narrowed. Were they expected at the committee office? Phoebe asked. Not by me. They exchanged a look. No agreement was spoken, yet both moved at once. The town hall side door stood slightly open, and voices carried through the passage. Phoebe knew she ought not listen. She also knew that if gentlemen wished not to be overheard while plotting harm, they should close doors. Voss's voice came first. The report must state immediate danger, not repairable danger, immediate. The words are essential. Another voice answered, low and uneasy. Mr. Hargreaves, the junior surveyor appointed by the county magistrates. I cannot sign what is untrue. You can sign what is prudent. Suppose the ceiling falls after you hesitate. Suppose lives are lost. Better a severe recommendation than a fatal indulgence. Mr. Gibbs muttered, and there's compensation for the inconvenience. Paper rustled. Phoebe's pulse quickened. Mr. Mere's jaw tightened. Voss said, The county need not trouble itself with sentimental local attachments. Condemn the building, and I shall see that your professional prospects improve. Phoebe stepped forward, but Mr. Mere caught her wrist gently. Wait, he breathed. Inside, Mr. Hargreaves said, This is irregular. It is opportunity, Voss replied. There was silence. Then Phoebe heard the scrape of a chair. She pulled free and entered. Opportunity for whom, Alderman? 3 men turned. Mr. Hargreaves went white. Mr. Gibbs swore beneath his breath. Voss, after one flicker of surprise, smiled. Miss Hartwell, have you taken to wandering through municipal offices? Only when bribery speaks loudly enough to guide me. Mr. Gibbs stepped forward. Careful. Mr. Mere entered behind her. Very careful indeed. Voss's expression changed at the sight of him. You heard nothing of importance, he said. We heard enough, Phoebe replied. Mr. Hargreaves looked miserable. I had not agreed. No, Mr. Mere said, and you will not. Voss laughed softly. This is absurd. A lady with an attachment to a ballroom and an ambitious young architect imagine conspiracy because they fear progress. Phoebe lifted the folded paper from the table before he could stop her. It was a draft recommendation. The words, unsafe, beyond economical repair, and demolition advised, leapt from the page. Mr. Mere took it, read quickly, then looked at Hargreaves. Did you inspect the structure? Not yet. And yet this was prepared? Hargreaves swallowed. Alderman Voss supplied the form. Voss's voice sharpened. You are making enemies, Mere. Mr. Mere folded the paper. Then I shall try to deserve them. Phoebe felt a fierce pride rise within her. But Voss was not finished. He looked from Jonathan to Phoebe, and his smile became poisonous. How touching, The architect and the manager's niece united in noble defence. One wonders whether the committee will admire your zeal when it hears how privately you conduct public business. Phoebe went still. Mr. Mere's face darkened. You will not speak of Miss Hartwell in that manner. Will I not? No. One word. Quiet. Immovable. Voss studied him, then gave a short bow. We shall see what society permits. He left with Mr. Gibbs at his heels. Mr. Hargreaves sank into a chair. Phoebe stood very straight, though her hands trembled. Mr. Mere turned to her. Miss Hartwell. I am well. You are not. I shall be. He looked as though he wished to say more, but Hargreaves was present and the door stood open. Phoebe drew a breath. Mr. Hargreaves, you will attend the assembly rooms tomorrow morning and inspect them properly. Mr. Mere will be present, so will my uncle, Sir Lionel, and any member of the committee with courage enough to prefer truth to convenience. The young surveyor nodded. Yes, Miss Hartwell. She turned to Mr. Mere. We must inform Sir Lionel. At once. They stepped back into the rain together. Neither spoke until they reached the assembly room's portico. Water dripped from the stone lions on either side of the steps. Phoebe looked out at the wet square. He will try to ruin me, she said. No. You cannot prevent gossip. I can answer it. How? He hesitated. And in that hesitation she understood that there were answers which might protect her reputation while binding him to declarations he had not meant to make. Pain touched her, sharp and swift. Please do not, she said. His eyes met hers. I would not offer from obligation. The words struck with quiet force. Phoebe could not look away. And would you offer at all? She asked, before caution could restrain her. Rain filled the silence. Mr. Mere removed his hat slowly. Yes, he said. Her breath caught. But not here, he continued softly. Not under threat. Not as a shield against another man's malice. You deserve more than a defence. Phoebe's eyes stung. For once, she had no clever reply. The door opened behind them, and her uncle called anxiously, Phoebe? Mr. Mere? What is this I hear about Voss? The moment broke, but it did not vanish. It remained between them, like a lamp carried carefully through rain. Chapter 5. The town takes sides. By Saturday, Ashcombe Wells was at war. Not with muskets, thank heaven, nor even with fists, though Mr. Gibbs and the butcher came near enough in the market square that both wives had to intervene. It was a war of petitions, whispers, loyalties, and printed notices. Alderman Voss declared that public safety required immediate condemnation. Phoebe declared that public safety required honest repair. Mr. Mere produced drawings, measurements, estimates, and a firm professional statement that demolition was unnecessary. Voss produced rumours. He implied that costs had been hidden. He suggested that Mr. Pike was unfit. He hinted that Miss Hartwell had undue influence over the architect. He spoke of modern hotels, wider rooms, improved accommodation, increased prosperity. Phoebe answered with facts. She published a subscription account in the library window. She listed every donation and expense. She invited tradesmen to sign a declaration of support. She persuaded Lady Enderby to host a card evening in aid of the restoration, then persuaded Lady Enderby that inviting the butcher's wife was an act of noble leadership rather than social collapse. Community, Phoebe said, is most impressive when visible. Lady Enderby considered. Very well, but she must not sit beside Mrs. Phelps. They quarrel over whist. The card evening became the most talked-of event of the season. The concert chamber and card room were filled, but not crowded. Candles gleamed in mirrors. The rain had cleared, and moonlight silvered the square outside. Merchants stood near gentry, tradesmen's wives wore their best caps, and young ladies sold little paper fans printed with the words, Ashcombe, restored. Mr. Mere had objected to the motto at first. "It is not yet restored," he said. "It will be," Phoebe replied. "That is confidence. That is marketing." He laughed, and she felt her heart answer. Yet beneath the warmth of the evening lay tension. The full committee was to meet on Monday, when Mr. Hargreaves would present his independent findings. If Voss succeeded in swaying them, the assembly rooms might still be condemned. During the interval, Phoebe slipped into the empty ballroom. The room was dark, except for moonlight through the high windows and the glow spilling beneath the closed doors from the card room. Timber supports stood beneath the damaged ceiling like solemn sentries. The painted clouds above were scarred but not lost. She heard the door open. "I thought I might find you here," Jonathan said. The use of her name had not occurred aloud, yet in her mind he had become Jonathan already, and the sound of his voice in the empty ballroom moved her more than it ought. "I wanted to see it quietly," she said. He came to stand beside her. For a while they said nothing. Then he said, "When I was 12, my father took me to see a house he had helped build. We stood across the road because servants used the front steps, not masons." He pointed to a wall and said, "There, that will stand longer than the man who paid for it." I thought he was proud of the wall. Later I understood he was proud of having made something useful. Phoebe listened. "I wanted to build new things," he continued, "to be noticed, to prove I belonged in rooms where my father would have waited outside." He looked around the ballroom. "But this place has taught me something. Sometimes ambition is not making the world say your name. Sometimes it is helping what matters endure." Phoebe's throat tightened. "You have done that," she said. "Not alone." Their eyes met in the dim light. "You have made the town remember itself," he said. "That is no small thing." She tried to smile. "I have sold ribbons and bullied committees." "You have saved more than plaster." The words settled over her with a tenderness she could scarcely bear. From the card room came laughter and applause. Someone had won a hand. Life continued, warm and bright beyond the doors. Phoebe said, "I'm afraid." Jonathan turned fully toward her. "So am I." "You?" "Constantly." She smiled faintly. "You conceal it well." "So do you." The honesty between them was more intimate than any compliment. He took one step closer, then stopped, as though asking permission without words. Phoebe did not move away. "Phoebe," he said at last, very softly. Her name in his voice was a door opening. "Yes?" "I cannot offer you grandeur. I have never cared for grandeur. I have my profession, some savings, and prospects that may improve if I do not continue angering wealthy men." "That is a serious condition." "I am unlikely to meet it." She laughed, and he smiled. Then his expression grew earnest. "I love you," he said. "Not because Voss threatened you. Not because gossip pushed me toward honor. I love you because you see what others overlook, because you defend what cannot defend itself, because you make courage practical, and because every room I enter is altered if you are in it." Phoebe had imagined declarations, as many women do despite themselves. She had not imagined one that saw her so clearly. Tears gathered, but she did not hide them. "I love you too," she said, "though you are stubborn, too fond of measurements, and inclined to make noble speeches in unsafe ballrooms." He looked upward. "The shoring is adequate." She laughed through tears. He took her hand. No impropriety, no dramatic embrace, only his hand enclosing hers, warm and steady, in the wounded room they both hoped to save. When they returned to the card room, Lady Enderby looked from Phoebe's face to Jonathan's and smiled with dangerous satisfaction. Phoebe pretended not to see. But by Monday, everyone knew something had changed, and Monday mattered more than anything. The committee meeting was held at noon in the town hall. The room was crowded beyond comfort. Sir Lionel presided. Mr. Pike sat beside Phoebe, pale but determined. Jonathan stood near a table covered in plans. Mr. Hargreaves, nervous but resolute, held his report. Alderman Voss sat opposite, his expression smooth. The report was read. The assembly rooms were damaged but repairable. Immediate shoring had reduced risk. Permanent restoration was feasible. Demolition was not recommended. A murmur swept the room. Voss rose. With respect to Mr. Hargreaves, caution must prevail. Are we to risk lives for sentiment? Are we to pour funds into decaying walls when new prosperity waits? I have secured investors prepared to build a modern hotel and suite of rooms within 2 years. Ashcombe Wells must look forward. A few heads nodded. Then Phoebe stood. Her uncle touched her sleeve, but she gently withdrew. Sir Lionel, gentlemen, ladies, she began, for half the town had squeezed inside whether invited or not. I have been told often this week that the assembly rooms are merely a building. I ask you to consider whether that is true. She looked around the room. When visitors come to Ashcombe Wells, they do not come only for water. They come because there is society here, music here, welcome here. The assembly rooms support lodging houses, shops, seamstresses, chairmen, musicians, printers, bakers, gardeners, servants, and families whose names never appear in committee minutes. Mrs. Bell wiped her eyes. Phoebe continued. We are not choosing between past and future. We are choosing what sort of future we wish to have. One purchased by a few men behind closed doors, or one built openly by a town that knows its own worth. Voss's face hardened. Phoebe lifted the draft condemnation paper. This was prepared before inspection. It was pressed upon a surveyor with promises of advantage. That is not caution. That is corruption. The room erupted. Voss sprang up. This is slander. Mr. Hargreaves stood, trembling. It is true. Silence fell. Then Mr. Grindle rose. I saw Alderman Voss's men measuring the south frontage last month. Mr. Atwood added, He approached me regarding purchase of adjoining stables. Mr. Gibbs tried to leave, but the butcher blocked the door. Sir Lionel struck the table. Order! It took several minutes to restore calm. When the vote was finally taken, the result was decisive. The assembly rooms would be restored. Alderman Voss resigned from the committee before he could be removed from it, which satisfied no one but preserved the shape of public dignity. Mr. Gibbs lost the contract. Mr. Hargreaves, having chosen honesty at the final moment, was forgiven by most and watched by all. As for Phoebe, she was surrounded. Lady Enderby embraced her with such force that her bonnet slipped. Mrs. Bell kissed her cheek. Tradesmen shook her hand. Sir Lionel bowed and said, Ashcombe Wells owed her a debt. Phoebe thanked them all, but her eyes searched for Jonathan. He stood near the window, watching her with such quiet pride that the crowded room seemed to fade. When she reached him, he bowed. Miss Hartwell, he said, though his eyes said Phoebe. Mr. Mere, you have won. We have begun. He smiled. That is the better answer. Chapter 6. A Room Restored. Restoration is less romantic in practice than in speeches. It smells of lime wash. It produces dust in places no dust has any right to enter. It requires invoices, scaffolding, arguments about timber, arguments about gold leaf, arguments about whether cherubs ought to be cleaned or left with a dignified patina. Phoebe discovered she preferred patina when cleaning cost £17. Jonathan argued for proper restoration. Phoebe argued for solvency. They compromised so often that Lady Enderby declared them practically married already. In due course, they were formally engaged. Mr. Pike gave his blessing with tears in his eyes and then asked whether Jonathan intended to remove Phoebe from Ashcombe Wells. "No, sir," Jonathan said. "I hope to remain near enough to be useful, provided Miss Hartwell does not object to marrying a man often covered in plaster dust." Phoebe said she had managed worse substances during subscription suppers. The wedding was set for late summer, after the assembly rooms reopened. Phoebe insisted upon this order. "I cannot marry in the midst of scaffolding," she said. Jonathan looked amused. "Many marriages have less support." She struck his sleeve lightly with a folded programme. By July, the roof was sound, the ceiling repaired, the gallery strengthened, and the painted clouds restored where water had stained them. The golden stars shone again, not garishly, but with the soft gleam of something rescued rather than replaced. The reopening ball became the greatest event Ashcombe Wells had ever known. Every lodging house was full. The high street windows were dressed with blue ribbons. The bakery produced little iced cakes, shaped like stars. Mrs. Bell created a headdress called the Phoebe, which involved feathers, ribbon, and more height than Phoebe felt any sensible woman required. On the evening itself, the assembly rooms blazed with light. Carriages filled the square. Music floated through the open doors. The ballroom, once shored and silent, now shimmered beneath chandeliers. Fresh garlands framed the gallery. The floor gleamed. The air smelled of beeswax, flowers, silk, and anticipation. Phoebe stood at the entrance beside her uncle, receiving guests. She wore a gown of soft blue silk, remade from one of her mother's, with pearl combs in her hair. She had not intended to look beautiful. She had intended to look respectable, efficient, and calm. Judging by Jonathan's face when he entered, she had failed in at least one respect. He bowed before her. "Miss Hartwell." "Mr. Mere." "You look—" "Take care. Lady Enderby is listening." Lady Enderby, standing 3 feet away, said, "I am old, not deaf." Jonathan smiled. "Then I shall say only that the room is much improved." Phoebe arched a brow. "The room?" "The whole room." Lady Enderby looked delighted. The first dance was reserved for those whose names headed the restoration subscription. Lady Enderby opened with Sir Lionel, declaring that her nerves had never been better. The second set filled quickly. Then the musicians began a country dance, and Jonathan offered Phoebe his hand. "Will you dance with me in the room you saved?" "The room we saved." He inclined his head. "The room we saved." She placed her hand in his. They joined the set. Phoebe had managed countless dances from the side of the room. She had arranged partners, soothed refusals, corrected musicians, and ensured no young lady was left too long without attention. But to stand within the dance, beneath the restored ceiling, with Jonathan opposite her and the whole town bright around them, felt like stepping into a life she had helped make possible. The music began. They moved through the figures, hands meeting and parting, turning, crossing, returning. Jonathan danced well, not showily, but with the same attentive precision he brought to his drawings. Phoebe laughed when he nearly collided with Captain Fane, and Jonathan's smile answered hers openly. Around them, Ashcombe Wells danced too. The milliner beside the magistrate's daughter, the banker's wife with the apothecary, young clerks visiting ladies, elderly patrons, tradesmen invited for their service, and subscribers who had given £1 or 100. For one evening, rank still existed. Regency England did not mislay rank so easily, but gratitude softened its edges. After the dance, Jonathan led Phoebe to the side of the room. "Are you happy?" he asked. She looked around. Her uncle was smiling. Lady Enderby was showing her numbered ticket to anyone who had not escaped quickly enough. Mrs. Bell was pointing proudly at a ribbon garland she had supplied. The musicians played beneath the strengthened gallery. Above them, the painted sky held. "Yes," Phoebe said, "but not because everything is perfect." "No? because it is standing, because it was worth saving, because people helped save it. Jonathan looked at her with that steady tenderness she had come to trust. And because, he prompted softly. She smiled. Because you are here. His hand brushed hers, brief and proper, yet full of promise. Later that evening, Sir Lionel called for silence. A hush spread through the ballroom. He spoke of gratitude, perseverance, civic pride, and restoration. He praised Mr. Mere's skill, Mr. Pike's service, the tradesman's labour, and the generosity of patrons. Then he turned to Phoebe. But there is one person, he said, without whom Ashcombe Wells would now be planning the funeral of its own heart. Miss Hartwell understood, before many of us did, that these rooms were not merely walls and a ceiling, but the meeting place of our town's hopes. She organised, argued, accounted, persuaded, and refused to be overawed. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Miss Phoebe Hartwell, the woman who saved the assembly rooms. Applause rose like a wave. Phoebe stood motionless, overwhelmed. Then her uncle squeezed her hand, and Jonathan across the room bowed to her with shining eyes. She curtsied. The applause continued until she laughed and begged them to stop. When the music resumed, Jonathan found her near the open doors to the portico. Night lay soft over the square, the lamps glowed, the town seemed to breathe in contentment. You dislike being praised, he said. I dislike crying in public. You managed admirably. I shall send you all future compliments to answer on my behalf. I will draw plans for them. She smiled. For a while they stood side by side, listening to the music. At last, Jonathan said, I have been asked to design improvements for the pump garden. Have you? With sensitivity to existing character. How revolutionary. And a modest office may be available near the square. Phoebe looked at him. You will stay? If my wife wishes it. The word wife warmed her to the fingertips. She does, Phoebe said softly. Very much. He took her hand, hidden slightly by the shadow of the portico. Inside, the assembly rooms glowed with candlelight and music. Outside, the spa town that had nearly lost its heart shone under a summer moon. Phoebe thought of the crack in the ceiling, the rain, the whispers, the ledgers, the fear. She thought of how near they had come to losing everything, because powerful men had mistaken memory for weakness and community for sentiment. But hope, she had learned, could be organised. It could be entered into ledgers, tied with blue ribbon, sung beneath candlelight, argued in committee rooms, drawn in careful lines by an architect's hand, and carried by ordinary people who refused to surrender what they loved. Jonathan's fingers closed gently around hers. The music changed to a waltz, still new enough to stir murmurs among the cautious and delight among the bold. Lady Enderby appeared in the doorway. Miss Hartwell, Mr. Mere, you are not hiding from your own triumph, I hope. Only resting from it, Phoebe said. Resting is for bath chairs and invalids. Come inside. Jonathan offered his arm. Phoebe took it. Together they stepped back into the light, beneath the restored ceiling, into the room they had saved and the future they would build. And if, many years later, visitors to Ashcombe Wells asked why a small golden star above the musicians' gallery bore the initials P, H, and J-M, some old resident would smile and say that every building has its story. But this one, they would add, was a love story of stone and music, courage and partnership, a town restored to itself, and the woman who refused to let its heart be pulled down. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the